Well, thanks for staying with us on the program. It's about time for us to begin our conversations. We're now joined by our guest who is live in the studio, Mr. Ben Agunloye. Good morning to you, Mr. Ben.
Good
And welcome
morning.
on the program.
Good morning.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. First things first, it's concerning the recent statement made by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, citing that he's positive Nigeria is at a turning point. Now, this particular statement could be perceived from different angles, from different individuals. But for you particularly, Mr. Ben, how did you perceive this statement? And are we really at a turning point? And where are we turning to?
Well, we are at a turning point. Now, maybe I do a bit of science.
Yeah.
And when you move, life is more of taught to us than a straight path.
Yeah.
And so you have what you call point of inflection. You have, of course, you have maximum point, you have minimum point. I think that if you ask me, over the last few years, I think we've gone to what we could really call our lowest in terms of governance, in terms of organization, in terms of policy. I think that's where we have been. And so the only thing we can do is to go upward. But when you are also going uphill, you need to know that there are valleys on both sides. So we are at a turning point to go up positively, economically, socially, and infrastructurally, provided we ensure that we stay on the line and we do not fall into any of the valley on either side.
Now, I'm talking about these metaphorical valleys. There is one that has always been with us, and it's the multidimensional poverty valley. Recent statistics are pointing towards 13 million more Nigerians who are set to plunge into multidimensional poverty off the back of 133 million who are currently
That's
below that
already
poverty
there.
line owing to our current inflationary level. Do you think that as we look to navigate these turns, much like you just brilliantly laid the background to, more Nigerians will fall over this steep valley?
Well,
Is it a price we need to pay to get this country where it needs to be?
Well, we will need to pay the price of sacrifice to get to where we need to be, but we also need to guide against, like I said, falling into the valleys. The things that have been put in the program, there are things that are meant to lift people who were down there up. There are people, 20,000, 50,000, 75,000 naira will make a great impact on their life. If actually we allow those palliatives to get to them, then there will be a difference. But for somebody who needs ₦1 million per day to survive, if you give him the 75,000 you should give to 100 people, you will realize that he's still not going to meet his need.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the 1,000 people who possibly should have taken 1,000 naira each, right, and feel a little more excited for the day, would have been left abandoned. Meanwhile, the 1 million, he will blow it in one day
And not even
he's
feel the
gone.
impact.
He won't feel the impact and he will not even appreciate it. So that's what we're saying from where we are. We need more of monitoring. We need more of evaluation. We need more of oversight. Thank God that statement is coming from the man who has the biggest responsibility for oversight in Nigeria. He is coordinating 359 other people in the National Assembly.
Yes.
So if the House of Rep can effectively ensure
Yeah.
that their oversight function in the area of welfare, in the area of infrastructure, in the area of policy implementation are adequately and judiciously done, then we won't have more people dropping.
Now the speaker also pointed out that our economy began to plunge, downward when we dumped oil, or when we dumped agriculture for oil. Now, this was decades ago now. In your opinion, do you think that maybe, just maybe, if we had not discovered oil and we had focused our attention on agriculture all this while, would we have still grown to this height as a nation?
Well,
In contrast to what the speaker has pointed out now.
well, All those who feel is because that oil is our problem, I do not agree. Yes, there is oil.
Yeah.
There has always been agriculture. Less than, as we speak today, I'm not sure that we have up to 200,000 people who are actively engaged in the oil industry.
In the country?
That means there are about 200 million people outside the oil sector. So the question, therefore, is not about the issue of oil, it is about the issue of people who are given position of authority focusing on privileges as against responsibility. If you ask me, what is the number one commodity that Nigeria should sell? It is not even agriculture. It is tourism.
Why?
Diverse culture, diverse landscape. You're talking of over 7 vegetation zones. You're talking of valleys.
Mostly in the south part of the country.
Across the nation.
country.
Across the nation. When you go to a state like Taraba should have up to 3 vegetation zones. That's one state.
The Gashega-Gumti National Park.
So you see all that. So we've got the parks, we've got the hills, we've got the valleys. Nigeria is one of the most well-drained nations in the world. Virtually every state has at least a river or a river channel. There are hills and valleys everywhere.
That are not being utilized.
We are not utilizing most of these things. We are not marketing these things. We don't have a proper record of our culture. We are not putting them in place for the world to see. So when you fail, right, when we fail in the area of cultural integration, perhaps for whatever reason, people have their ulterior motives, right? Nigeria should be a center for black civilization, and people across the world should be coming here more than they go to Kenya or Ghana or South Africa or Egypt. It should be a sort of a Jerusalem, a Mecca, or a Rome to the rest of the world.
Do you think that maybe the minute number of individuals who benefit the most from our oil and gas industry are the ones who sort of cry and complain the most that ever since Nigeria discovered oil, we have abandoned agriculture? Yet individuals like the Right Honorable Speaker of the House of the National Assembly, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, continues to decry such such situations, having benefited very massively from the oil and gas industry as well.
Yes, we might say people who benefited are part of those also complaining. But what we're saying, it is not about the complaint. It's not about what has gone wrong. What do we need to go forward from where we are? Fix infrastructure, fix security, and agriculture and tourism will begin to find their right of place in the system. We are well-traveled people by ourselves as a nation. As a nation, there is no place you go you won't find Nigerian. It's also time that some tribe or group begin to think that they are more exposed than the other. No, every Nigerian you go, you see them everywhere. You see an Igede man in almost every state in this country. The same thing go for the Ijaw man. You go to Kebbi, you see an Ijaw man there by the Rima Basin doing his fishing. So we are generally everywhere. Go to Liberia, go to as far as Gambia, you're going to find Nigerian there doing different things. So we are well traveled, we are culture inclined, and we need to get to that point where put the security in place, put the infrastructure in place, the rail is there, the road is there, and then the people are also creative and they can begin to do things around what you have created.
Well, Mr. Ben, I much agree with you that we're blessed as a people and we have it embedded in our DNA to be great.
Yeah.
But one thing that continues to become the bane of conversation is leadership. Now, under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, particularly from the Renewed Hope mandate and its agenda, he had outlined 6 policy directions for 2024, and going into 2025, he has added 10 new ones. I'd like for us to review a few of the 6 we saw last year and how positive or how remarkable in terms of what they have achieved are. This morning, Nel Fund was banding figures on the front pages of how many students benefited from the students' loan scheme. That was one of the 6 major policies and bills he signed into law last year. He also signed into law a minimum wage bill. He also had review for judicial officers, allowances and payments. There was the national anthem bill to reignite some of this patriotism you talked about in your brief, the Electricity Amendment Act, and not forgetting the Development Commission bills, where the South, East, and Northwest benefited. In reviewing this renewed hope agenda off the back of these 6 bills Mr. President signed last year, for you, which of them serves as the safety net you were talking about to stop people from falling off the cliff?
Definitely the NEL Fund for once. For me, I think NEL Fund has served a purpose. There was the element of mistrust. There was the element of some individuals not getting their children engaged early enough. Yes, NEL Fund would only cover the public schools. It then means that if you want it to affect more majority of the people, we need to expand the capacity of the public schools to absorb students and train them. Because any child in the private school, it doesn't matter how struggling your parent may be, you cannot access NEL Fund. So if more of the children can gain admission and get space in the public school, I think that to a large extent, that is a great relief. You get the tuition done, the child gets a stipend of about 20,000. That might not take him from home to school, but you are sure that when that child is in school, even if you will need more than 20,000 for feeding and other things in a month, the chances are that that will be something that that relieves the parent to an extent. So I think for NEL Fund, great. For electricity, I think that the states are trying to buy in, but for me, they are still not. I think the states are too slow. That's what I would say.
Slow in implementation?
Yes, slow implementation, because having signed that into law, it is for the state to now take off and say, okay, this is our own electricity regulatory system. This is the way we want things done in this state. And then when you put your program and they are clear, investors can begin to key in. The state can decide to form strategic partnerships. Okay, the states should even come up with what is available. In Nigeria, the sun comes out everywhere without shame. So it means that if you are looking in the direction of renewable, you don't have issues with solar. A good number of the states also have some measure of waterhead. They might not be in the size of Kainji or Mambila, but they should be able to drive one or two things. You could create an industrial hub around your waterhead. You generate the electricity there, give it to the industry, and then maybe back them up with solar. So I think that the states have not, in my opinion, keyed in appropriately and swiftly into what has been provided or the opportunity that has been given to them in that direction.
Now still talking about electricity, let's take a look at it from a different angle, you know, where the federal government had pledged, again, to tackle the issue of grid collapses in the country, which has been a very incessant issue. Now, it is also budgeting 8 billion naira for the protection of power infrastructure and promising to build 34 new substations. This is following Minister Adelabo's complaints about, you know, vandalism being the major cause of the continued power grid collapses across the country. What are your thoughts on this? Should Nigerians be excited?
First, I think something is wrong with our procurement process.
Okay.
Otherwise, there are things you use on the national grid or on transmission line that should not be available in the open market. So if our contractual process is right and these things are manufactured solely for the TCN, then whoever is involved in trying to steal will not get a value for it anywhere. And then illegal movement, when you even move it and you don't have a TCN movement approval, the police, the civil defense, you can easily be apprehended and be dealt with. So I think the issue of protection should go beyond. I think we like this situation in Nigeria. The first thing we want to think as a government people is throw money at the problem. No, you don't throw money at the problem. I always say, let's sit down and look at it. When you are talking about power, some are comparing us with South Africa or with Egypt or with this or with that. In the industry where I used to be, Nigeria does not consume 1% of what Egypt or South Africa, in fact, not the whole of South Africa, only one city in South Africa consume more than, in my industry, in printing, only one city in South Africa consumes more than the whole of Nigeria. So you cannot begin to use population and land mass to juxtapose. You need to come up with your own data. What is our consumption requirement? And then you can also determine, do we need to put everybody on the grid, or can you do a radial distribution? An axial distribution, not radial, in which case you are generating this electricity for Katampe and you are distributing it within Katampe. You are generating this for Paduma and you are distributing it within Paduma. Now, you now need to know that, okay, in the event of a shortfall, where is our backup? So when you are talking about 36 substations that eventually may end up being politicized, you now say put it in the state, put it in this senatorial district, put it. No, it is that we should go by what is the need of the people.
And how do we
address
address
on
it
the need
accurately?
You now want to look for how do we generate and transmit. It may not necessarily require taking more people to the national grid. And as for grid collapses, our grids are not smart. That's number one. Number two is that the number of generating stations we have today, for me, is too much for the national control to handle. When there were just 2, 3, 4 power stations, that's when national control for me was very important. Today, we have had capacity deployed elsewhere, and so we should continue to decentralize the grid system. But since we have decentralized generation, let's go ahead and decentralize the grid, the transmission, and then you have distribution. So that you don't stay in Maiduguri and be waiting for a control from Jeba or from Oshogbo before you can consume. You should be able to generate there, transmit within your geography, and reach the desired users.
Well, recently we got news that the Dangote refinery, alongside other major giant companies in the country, were pulling out of the national grid to generate their own electricity, and somehow speculations were that this will sort of reduce the load on our national grid and stabilize it for quite some time. Do you share the same thoughts, or are we just going to, or is the minister and the entire power ministry going to cook up yet another excuse as to why the power grid continues to collapse?
Definitely, in most Julius Berger installations that I have known, working as a field engineer back maybe in the years back, they don't use the national grid wherever they are. So I think that from takeoff, Dangote and the rest of them, for me, except if there is a law that says they cannot, should ordinarily not
be part of the national
grid. Now, the issue of
just to
pulling
that point, far back as 2010, we're also aware that the Nigerian Electricity Regulation Commission had issued permits, much like that, to such companies to generate their own power. So they've been all the way back to 2010 giving such permits. But a lot of these firms, up until last year, when the grid was most epileptic, did not use those permits. So would you tie that to inefficiency on their part, or over-reliance on our not-so-smart power grid, in your words?
Yes, on their part, I would see it as improper planning. Because for me, if you're talking of 2010 today, any company that even started in Nigeria from 2000 till date that did not consider that did not see the national grid as a backup, but see them as main source, I think hadn't planned properly. From Abacha regime, it had become obvious that you need an alternative power if you would run well.
Would this also include hospitals? Because we see the situation in UI, in Ibadan, where the issue is becoming protests are now rocking the major gates of UI, owing to this blackout that they say is also off the back of some old debt.
For me, clearly, do we need the tertiary health facilities to be on this national grid? My answer is no. The maximum, like I said, is you can have it for a backup, but not as your main source. We have enough opportunities for renewable. So I see no reason why UCH, UNTH, and the rest of the tertiary health facilities, and even the tertiary institutions themselves, I see no reason why they should be.
Because 82 days is such a long time not to have power for even a household. Talk more of a tertiary institution, like a hospital,
like a tertiary health facility. So for me, Yes, I think there is this policy from the rural electrification scheme. I think they did something in LAD, but we should ramp that up. It should not be 5 years before you roll out the next institution. Well, I think in the last discussion they are talking about some loot refund that will be coming and be going into electricity. I think that priority should be given in whatever comes in to the university sites, to the tertiary health institution. And of course, even if you say it's rural, the environment surrounding some of them are actually rural environment. So you may want a situation where they generate, what they have is more than what they need, and then the perimeter fence of the institution, those who dwell in that environment
would also benefit.
Who benefit from that. And there can always be a billing arrangement that can be appropriately monitored by the institution to ensure that at least the services are augmented.
Now, still sticking with this electricity and back to the figure of 8 billion naira in the 2025 budget, where the minister was looking to clear up his name. You talked about some loopholes in our procurement system, owing to the fact that if this issue's vandalization is bringing about, with the installations vandalized, they should not be available in the open market for any persons to buy. The challenge too is also with the procurement of the Ministry of Power. There were some reported scams under the past minister, which is also being grilled in a court of law. Yesterday, some proceedings also told us for that knowledge as to how a BDC operator was said to have received several billions of naira for the former minister. Does this also draw to question our prosecution of such matters? Because if deterrents are not served, who is to say that these issues are not still ongoing in the Ministry of Power?
Well, the issues are ongoing, obviously. But we also need to look at the procurement process. We need to look at the audit process. We need to look at our agreements. And I will continue to insist that procurement managers should be sanctioned for wrong procurement. Lawyers in the ministry, in the public sector, should be sanctioned by the regulatory bodies for for lawyers for the profession in Nigeria for wrong agreements signed. And of course, accountants should be punished for wrong invoices, for wrong payments. When that is done, because the accountants, some of them are posted from the accountant general, the federal auditors are posted from the auditor general. So why should it take 3 years to know that something has been done wrong? At the point where it was done wrong, where was the federal auditor? Right? The lawyer who signed the agreement, were the things right? Sometimes in December, you are being called to come and sign an agreement for some transaction that had happened, that even the people who were involved in the transaction, maybe some of them were no longer
because the people involved, like you say, in this case, is a BDC operator who many are asking how he came into dealings with the former minister, Salim Aman. Allegedly, 33 billion was diverted through this operator. Is the EFCC who is now charging former minister Salim Aman to court over his dealings with this BDC operator? Does the EFCC in somewhat also deserve some commendation? Because of late it's been about them versus Yahoo boys.
Well, it depends on at what point that the transaction happened. If it happened when NFIU was still under EFCC should also be
charged in the suit.
Yeah, they should be part of the suit. And those who were supposed to monitor movement of money under EFCC, NFIU.
How can they be part of the suit when they are the ones suing the former minister to court?
That's what I'm saying, that if NFIU was under them when the transaction happened, then they are the ones, the nation, everybody who was involved at that time should first of all be produced and be punished. Because if you move 5 million naira from your account to him, be sure that if he tries to transfer it immediately, I know some of our big banks that will not allow it.
That will flag it.
They will flag it. So if the monies that are of that size are meant to be flagged, how come they pass through without an NFIU audit? So the case in court, you should, who were monitoring NFIU at the time of those transactions? What flags did they raise? Who cleared the flags? Those questions should be answered. We should not just be pushing only the minister. Everybody who was involved in the transaction process should be brought to book. The minister is political, his trial might take a long time. But for the professionals, It shouldn't. You
It
should
should
allow
be
their
swift.
professional corps to deal with them as swiftly as possible.
Now,
for their negligence.
does this fall back to the table of the Attorney General of the Federation to prosecute these all individuals involved, including the former minister, perhaps the EFCC and other institutions
and
as well?
NFIU and the account, everybody involved in the transaction? Because sometimes we leave all the small boys. You deal with the big elephant. Eventually, because all the other fellows have been covered, you won't get the right information. But when you want to do it, now look at the Ibori case back, I think it was in the UK. You remember that his lawyer eventually got dealt with, his courier got dealt with. They have picked all of them, and I think some of them were even sentenced before him. Because if you have established that the lawyer did wrong, you have established that the accountant did wrong, and you have sanctioned them. You have established that people should do the monitoring have done wrong, and they have been punished. What then means is that the process is what? Is wrong.
Yes.
And so whatever had been wrongly appropriated would have to be returned. But if you are promoting the desk officers, they are now permanent secretaries, they are now directors, they are now bigger boys. Without
we'll still have a repetition of that same
that
incident.
cycle will continue. But if you want to break the circuit for every fraud flagged, look through the process. Punish everybody one by one before you go there. That's why sometimes when Seraps sue the federal government, I look at no. If this thing has happened in a local government and the local government can be sued, let's get a judgment against the local government. If the federal government now try to shield or try to prevent the judgment from being enforced, you can now bring them in as an accomplice.
You mentioned. I like that. Sorry to cut you. Okay. I like that you brought Serap into this. I'll ask my final question on this before maybe Chijoke takes over and move to another subject matter. Serap happens to be the only one who keeps the eyes on the money, especially when it comes to procurement at that level. Yeah. Last year, we had a conversation on following up on some of the requests from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to the Senate, and there was a certain $500 million the Senate approved, which is supposed to go under the presidential mass metering project to solve some of the woes in the electricity sector. That was late in November. Up until 2 weeks ago, when the conversation came up again, many were sort of forgotten that there was $500 million on the table to go into mass metering. Beyond Serap, are there ways that Nigerians can keep track with this borrowing, that borrowing, and ensure, especially when it comes down to something as essential as electricity, that we see the end product of such monies?
Well, basically, we have issue of information dissemination. We have issue of information management. We have issue with data. Now, these things should have been like a platform. Serap is not the only NGO, but of course that is maybe like their main function. You have NGOs like Follow the Money. There are several other, transparency this, transparency that. So you would have expected that we could have a national platform, whether owned by the National Orientation Agency, by the Ministry of Information, or by any other such, organization, public and privately funded, where the NGOs can ensure that anybody across the world can actually track what is happening. So if you tell me you have put this money into mass metering, we need to look at what stage. Number one, what is the process from releasing the fund to when the meter will get, so we can know that, okay, this is 2 weeks after. By now, the procurement agreement should have been signed. Are the agreements existing? Then you move to the next stage. Where are they meant to be manufactured? At what point are they meant to be moved? What is the manufacturing period supposed to take? If those information are made available, then I'm sure there are people who can begin to monitor them. But the other option also is that there is a House Committee on Power. They can also become the eye of the people on that. To say that when you came to request for this project, you said it would take 16 weeks. This is the 3rd week. Have you done all the needful by the 3rd week? Have you done all the needful by the 8th week? Not that you give and then you wait. After 16 weeks, you are now asking. No, it shouldn't be. it should be that for every project that has a lifetime, these are the people involved, these are the processes involved, right? These are the stages, and these are the outcomes from each stage. So when you put in the money, what are the immediate outcomes? What are the long-term outcomes? Sometimes that will also justify if the people who are managing it are doing it right. And if they are not doing it, you may need to change people, or you want to change vendors. Something has got to be done.
Mr. Ben, finally on the issue of power, about 5 days ago, we saw that former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, as well as Muhammadu Buhari, alongside Fashola, had to testify in a Paris court over the $6 billion Mambila Power Project arbitration, which, the contract breach allegations. I personally did a documentary on the Mambila Plateau concerning the Mambila Power Project, and quite frankly, one of the catchphrases in my documentary there then was, "Where is the dam?" There is no dam.
So
$6 billion. Is this what's one of the many issues that continue to hinder or cause an impediment to steady power supply in the country?
Well, non-developing the things that we should have developed, at least to the sector of generation, can be part. Of course, we have issues at the distribution level. You have issues with the TCL. When you come to Mambila, to be specific, it's still the same thing we are saying. What is the process? We want to build a dam that can give us maybe 3,000 megawatts of electricity and so much water for irrigation.
Yes.
Right? Now, how long? What is the gestation period from inception to completion? And what are the things that were meant to be done at each stage? Is the blueprint available to the National Assembly? Because the issue we are talking about now happened in the period of political dispensation, so you will not say it's military fiat. So those who have responsibility for oversight function, what did they do? Now, this scam we're talking about is not, in my opinion, very different from what you have under PE and ID. It's almost similar. Some people
situation.
Just sign an agreement, they brought in nothing, and they want to take away so much. So, like I would always say, let's go back first. Who were the people that drafted the agreement?
In the first place.
Who were those that signed? Who were those that vetted it? If they are still existing, for their errors, they need to be punished.
Now, a fact that you might note here is that Nigeria itself is accused of, breaching the terms of the power project contract awarded to Sunrise Power and Transmission Limited by former President Olusegun Obasanjo back in 2003.
That's what I'm saying. When Agunloye was the minister, that was when that was done. Now, the claim from the president is that, now, I think one of the things in that era is, if you come and you package your proposal and you say the government will not pay, but you will you will bring your money and you will do it. The government at that time was always excited,
ready to push out funds.
No, not push out funds, come and use your fund, and then you can build, operate, and transfer.
Yes.
But they give you agreements and they give you other things without necessarily verifying that you have the capacity to do what you have said you want to do. Sunrise, I think, is a Nigerian-based company.
Yeah.
When you go through the project, I think there is a China or is it an Asia-based company that was also involved with the actual implementation. So Sunrise is more like a middleman. And so they don't possibly have the money. Is it like what the Americans would call facilitators? I'm sure in the British system, facilitators are seen more as criminals or fraudulent process. But it works in the US, and sometimes in Nigeria we want to follow the US smartness without actually having the enabling environment to enforce due process. So I think that here due process had not been followed. Monitoring and evaluation had not happened, because if it has been happening long ago, you should also have known that this thing is not being done. Because if you sign an agreement in 2003, 22 years after, the dam is not there, I don't think anybody should be making any claim. And even if there were points when there were breaches, at what point did the National Assembly set up a panel to look at that? Who were those representing the Mambila axis in the National Assembly?
In the National Assembly, as at the time.
Both in the Senate and in the House of
Representatives.
As at the time and even up till today. Because that project still need to be done.
It has been awarded.
So the project still need to be done. And if it is not done, you need to bring the people to the table. If you need to revoke or you need to re-award, that can be done.
Well,
The absence of monitoring and evaluation, and of course the failure of the National Assembly when it comes to oversight, is responsible for some of these gaps that we can see.
Now, several gaps in our electricity sector, and this morning conversations as to how 8 billion naira would be used to strengthen electricity supply and provide for protection of power installations across the country. The Minister, Chief Adelabu, is also talking about 33 substations to be built across the country to enhance our power supply. But Mr. Ben is adamant that if the National Assembly does not up its game in oversight, would revisit this vicious circle of unending power instability in the country. Now, in moving forward, the National Assembly is also being called upon by the Nigerian Labour Congress in light of an approval given by the Nigerian Communications Commission (NCC) to telecommunication operators in Nigeria to hike their tariff by 50%. In defense to that, they say the last hike was 12 years ago, and this hike is long overdue owing to inflation and the exchange rate of the dollar. However, organized labor and subscribers are kicking against it because they say that individuals who just obtained 70,000 naira minimum wage cannot be using 15% of that amount to service communication in a month. Now, they're also mobilizing for a showdown should this hike not be reversed. Now, Mr. Ben, it's becoming a very cataclysmic event here. And in moving forward, I don't know how this conversation will be had. Operators are saying the last hike was 12 years ago. A lot has changed. We're not making profits. Subscribers are saying the current realities of the economy would not permit for this to be done now. It is ill time. The NLC is preying on the National Assembly. How do we balance this conversation for the best interest of both parties involved?
In the best interest of all, is there need and justification for a tariff change? If it has not been changed for 12 years, I think the answer is yes. But should it be as high as 50%? My answer will be a no. Should the Ministry of Communication and Innovation with NCC engage a consultant to do a survey and come up with a price based on that survey? I don't also think that process is thorough enough. Yes, they have their information, but put that information on the table and bring the stakeholders together. So I think some of in the process, there has been what I would call stakeholders neglect or abuse of privilege. Yes, people have voted you or appointed you into office, but I think that you need to carry the people along. Oh. Now, what the telecom operators should also know, a pay TV, an online TV did that last year and they saw what the reflection was. First, the people went to court, some consumer went to court and this and that. Of course, they went ahead and implemented. And what did the people do? The people migrated to other services. Even though they have brought down the price back, those who migrated, I'm not sure, up to 50%
would go
returned.
back. Yeah.
Now, again, when you come to consumption, if you hike tariff, instead of talking for 3 minutes, people will talk for 1 minute.
And that will be counterproductive.
So that eventually will reduce
patronage.
Patronage. So we have to look at it from all sides. So I always believe that it is not all price increase that leads to
more profit,
higher revenue. Not even leave profit first. It can lead to more profit.
Yeah.
But when you now come to your total revenue, it may not. The impact may not be great. And that means that even though your profit margin is now higher, based on what you have delivered, the total consumption you get from the market has dropped. It's like you make 1 naira profit and you sold 1 million. Your profit is 1 million naira. You make 10 naira profit and you sold 20. Your profit is 200 naira.
200 naira.
So to a large extent, I think there has to be some middle ground. There has to be some negotiation. I knew that there was a template in December that posted 40% increase, if you remember, before the MTN MD came on national television and said we are demanding for 100. And then before you knew it, the minister said then we have done some
let's come down to 60%.
We have done some survey, so we'll give them something, but definitely not 100. So for me, I am also sure that somewhere in the midst, the intention is not to have that 50. It was just to test the market. If everybody keep quiet, it stays. But I think there has to be further discussion
and review of the percentage.
At that point, there can be a review. Everybody will now put it. There are other parameters, because yes, some parameters have been used to arrive at where they are according to the minister, but there are some figures and interest within the generality of the people, the consumers, the other stakeholders, that have not been factored in. And if that is not done, people will just go ahead with grudge. But like I insist, when you look at it, a boycott or a reduction in consumption will ultimately still affect the industry.
Now,
and then when you come to the industry, over the last 12 years, before Abbas died, Nitel was already thinking of moving to solar. And there are sites testing in, I think, there is this one in Gombe. I think it's Bajoga. They have one site somewhere in Nasarawa, close to Lafia. They were already doing their test. Another one in Ogun.
To move to solar in what sense?
For communication, in supporting their transmission station. So if they were doing that 95 to 97 or 98, and then the GSM operators came in 2002, and you came in with generators, and in 2025, you are still polluting the environment with diesel.
There's a call on operators.
Something is definitely wrong. Operators should have gone beyond generator and diesel
to reduce their cost of operation.
Because the minister is talking about diesel. Is it mandatory that they use diesel? No. Is diesel the only possible option? After 22 years of being in Nigeria, the answer is no. And I think that the minister should know better, that there are alternative sources of energy in Nigeria that the telcos could have leverage upon. And then you look at their overall procedures. Everybody is complaining about call drops, data, you buy data, you cannot run it. All manners of things are wrong. The services are not efficient. Now, how many research, because I keep asking that question, across the Nigerian university, whether private or public, is being sponsored by telcos for service improvement, for alternative solutions,
or even as part of their corporate social responsibility?
So I don't know. In Europe, it's not even done as CSR. If Mercedes come to a school and said, look, by 2029 we want to have this kind of ignition system, and then they commission some guys, whether they will be mechatronics, chemical, they come together, and then there is a team of supervisors. And that research is funded not by the students, but by the company. And when the product is ready, the prototype is given to the company to run. But you realize that sometimes some of the students migrate to go and work on developing, when they graduate, to go and work on developing the research further inside the industries. But what are the telcos doing in our universities, especially in postgraduate research, to support their things? We see them do music show and this and that and talent. Great. Those are CSR. But in terms of research, what
research
are
for better
telcos?
For better efficiency.
For efficiency, for better service, for service delivery, for even solving some other problems that may not be. That's where CSR will come in. There is malaria, or there is this, there is that, there is guinea worm. What you as can do that as a CSR. If you solve the problem, you would have been able to help the people.
Well, we have 10 minutes. Let's see how many more issues in the news we can squeeze in. Since we're still talking human capital development, let's bring in this health angle story that greeted the pages of 2 newspapers. Brain drain in the medical sector. Now, we're told that in Nigeria, there are only 6,000 consultants, medical consultants. And out of that 6,000, about 1,700 are nearing the retirement age of 60. A great majority of these experienced hands who are the ones who now train resident doctors and have other serving doctors under them for tutelage are also leaving the country. The younger doctors who are supposed to be filling these boots are also migrating outside of the country. Currently in the FCT, resident doctors are on a 3-day warning strike, complaining poor welfare and some entitlements owed to them. I don't know, this conversation has lingered on for a while. When Dr. Chris Ngige was the minister, he said that these are not the issues and those striking are not really the doctors, and that 7 core members can use to replace them. These conversations have continued even after he left office. I don't know how we continue to address these issues in a time when the health of Nigerians have become even more weary as we speak.
The question with brain drain is simple. Different countries will have different approach to solving that. One of the approaches in some countries in Europe is to increase the retirement age. Some had gone from 56 to 60, now to 65. One of the last strike in France had to do with that. And one of the issues that they even noticed, I think in some of them that they are trying to balance, is that the retired people are so much that the people who are working are so few and possibly not able to support them. So when you ask, should people, you don't have to stop anybody from traveling. And I don't think that people traveling should be a complaint. And the reality is this, if you want to be on the street and face it, yes. Cleaners are leaving Nigeria. Painters are leaving. Drivers are leaving.
Basically everyone.
So everybody is leaving. So rather than focusing, but are drivers cars on the road because drivers left? No, because new people are learning. So I think our concern should be more of what do we need to ensure that we build more capacity. That's number one. Number two is that there are also people within the country, even in the medical sector, who we can say are underemployed. Sometimes to get your job in the Federal Medical Center, in the National General Hospitals and the rest, you need some level of connection, not just your skill. So when you say people are leaving, you are looking at the roll call of the people that you have. Let's look at what is the total number of members registered as doctors in Nigeria. Do the association or the council know where they are? Do they know how many of them are alive? Can they tell us their level of employment? Are they well employed? Are they underemployed? And when you are talking about doctors leaving, is it the same thing with the private and the public sector? Because some of the private sectors are also still attracting skills from outside. So
because of proper remuneration.
Yeah, so we need to put this into the right perspective. Yeah. And like I said clearly, are our hospitals well managed? No. Is it the president that is managing them?
Certainly not.
It's not the president that is managing the clinics. It's not him that is managing the pharmacies for them. But they are going to tell you, I know a government hospital in this Abuja that will bill you for consumables, but you will still have to go outside
to
go and buy. You will pay for tests. When you get to the lab, they will tell you the reagent is not there, and then you are going out to buy. So now tell me why somebody who has an opportunity to go abroad for treatment will want to be subjected to that. Because before you cost and make me pay for a test, you should have confirmed from the lab that in fact it is the lab that should give you an input. So you wouldn't make me pay and then I'll get to the lab and you will say there are no reagents. But such language are freely used in government hospitals and nobody what cares. Some of the people you say that to are some of the people whose parents are in power.
Now, very, very quickly, the last subject we'll touch on is food insecurity, because for many, they also believe that nutrition is the basic medication anyone would take, even before having to go to the hospital. Now, the House of Representatives have passed 15 bills they believe would help fight against food insecurity, especially with the demographics? We're told that 31.8 million Nigerians are now at a high risk of suffering from acute hunger. I don't know what you make of this legislative intervention. Is it enough to shore up our efforts against food insecurity?
Well, they passed the law, they passed the budget. I will keep insisting. Are they doing their own job at the level of oversight? NISA, several under the Buhari regime, spend so much money. Anchor borrowers spend so much. If you look through the list and the process, the land where those farms should be have been mentioned. And so if you say you are planting maize in my territory, I should be able to see or send one of my legislative aides go and confirm
that this maize is really being planted,
is growing in my constituency. Take pictures and bring it back. If it is not there growing, then you drive from National Assembly to NISA headquarters and sit and request to see the nobody will, because you are even coming from National Assembly. In most cases, nobody sits you at the gate in a government office. That's what I've come to realize. So you just talk to the chairman on agriculture or chairman for that agency and go there. But are they doing that? So it's not about passing the law. Is just doing things right. The right thing is that oversight function to ensure that when the money and the projects are allocated, they are followed up. So you don't say you are building a rice mill and nothing is built. It is built and it is operational.
Mr. Ben, let me also take you back to earlier comments about the made by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Yeah. Now we are still talking about the House of Reps, where he said that Nigeria is at a turning point. Now, one of the strap lines accompanying that story is that the federal government is set to ensure that 65% arable land is cultivated in the country within 4 years. This is 2025, so we are looking at a projection of 2029.
Yeah.
How possible is this? 65%.
It's very possible.
With the level of insecurity in some agrarian
but this is how we get there. When people talk about agriculture, that's how I always say, if you give me Nigeria to run, infrastructure would take precedence before agriculture. I know a lot of rural areas, and I know that up till now, there are still environments where pineapples will ripe and will be wasted because there is no road to get them to the market. Where almost harvest season is coming and the water will overflow its bank and people can't go to the farm, and then animal will feast on the cassava, and then some water will even enter the land and they will rot away. But if the adequate infrastructure are in place, then you are sure that wherever you produce, what you have produced can get to the market. So on his part, that's why we will still come back to him.
Yeah.
Monitor that this infrastructure are put in place. In some of the places also, why insecurity pervades is because there is no presence of the government. There is no road, no electricity, no communication. It would apply. Was it the last kidnap in Kaduna? The school. I think I've met people from the school, I think including the principal in one of the safe school forums.
Yeah.
And it was like, look, yes, they came, they saw them, but you have to go like several kilometers away from the school before you can make a call.
Yes.
So it means that when the school was built, if you have put maybe the infrastructure for communication in place
it would
for
have been
the
a
school and the
different
environment, the security would have been more enhanced because they would have been able to say something when they saw it.
All right, Mr. Ben, I'm afraid time is fast running out. But I must thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. Wonderful conversation here.